Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities in Miniatures, and it's Friday once more, which means we're bringing to you yet another obscurity in literature. And this book is a doozy. If you like funky stuff, I cannot help but absolutely wholeheartedly recommend The Wrenchies by Farrell Dalrymple, if I am saying his name correctly. I first came across Farrell's work when he was doing Omega the Unknown for Marvel, which was a very unique take on a very C tier list has been washed up superhero that nobody hadn't touched in years. It's out there. It's still a superhero work, sorta. But then again, so are the Wrenchies. This is a book that kind of just goes in lots of different places, and I'll admit it's a bit dense, clocking in at almost 300 pages. It's about 290 something. So it's fairly thick and it's fairly dense in both its content and what's going on. So as you can see from the cover, we've got kids fighting with all sorts of high-tech weaponry in a post-apocalyptic landscape. And when you've got Mike Mignola throwing praise like that out there, that should tell you something right off the bat. We have a lot of, well, somewhat disjointed stories, at least in the beginning. Towards the end, things start to actually all come together. And Farrell Dalrymple has a very unique style. Usually I'm used to seeing his stuff in black and white or colored by other people, but as far as I know, this is all by his hand. So you have kind of the preface of the story where you have the two brothers who find a cave and end up finding mysterious monsters, as they are called, the Shadows Men. Later on, things happen and they start fighting them, and things get funky from there. Like I said, I don't want to spoil a whole lot. There's a lot going on in this story, but really for the bulk of it, we have things start off in this post-apocalyptic wasteland, that amulet being quite an important piece, and the Wrenchies, a gang of youths out there fighting the Shadows Men and hopefully not getting to the point of maturity, because that's when they strike you, end up coming across the comics and use that as the inspiration for their gang to fight all of the craziness going on around them. That's just part of the story. As things go, and yes, it is very much a post-apocalyptic story, especially at the beginning. You have all these various gangs fighting with each other, hanging out, doing stuff with there is no supervision. And just like I said, very dense panel work. There's a lot to really unpack in each of these, especially when you start getting into these big splash pages. And how can you not love when you have all of the secret underground base pages like that? There's really no explanation either for the random non-humans that show up, and then we start getting into the spirits, and then we start to venture into the spirit realm territory of things. And so you have this interesting mix of high technology and magic and mysticism, people traveling through the astral planes using comic books to cast spells, and then all of a sudden we end up in what we can call the real world with Hollis. And it's interesting because, again, we have the comics serving as this kind of centerpiece that everything kind of, is based on and focused on. And throughout the story, so our friend Hollis here ends up seeing some interesting things and ends up seeing this ghost. And then we end up meeting the scientist, who is also another major player. And then we start getting into time travel. Because why not, right? Yeah, we have the original Wrenchies, and they have quite an interesting part to play in all this as well. Music being one tool that they use to destroy the demons at various points. And I gotta say, tons and tons of excessive language. If that turns you off from a book, especially with children, children sometimes participating in absolutely violent battles, and at times meaning untimely violent deaths themselves. You might want to be aware of that. Guns that bleed. Yes, we have the Nephilim at one point. I mean, we're just throwing all kinds of crazy concepts, and that's something that I've noticed in a lot of Farrell Dalrymple's work. If you guys are familiar with like Pop Gun War or any of his other books, they have this very dreamlike quality of them, where there is a very sequential order of how things happen, but then we just have bonkers, balls to the wall craziness going on. He mixed his blood in the ink and drew the Wrenchies comic with it. Yeah. So we do end up tying back to the brothers from the very beginning, and they've got quite a bit to play with the story and their magical spells that they tried to cast to stave off the apocalypse. Yes. And so what happens is, later on, as the story goes, it almost ends up becoming a bit of a rescue mission. Obviously, I'm not going to give it away, but we've got some interesting stuff happening. And the art just is quite entertaining. Some of the major battles as all of the various Wrenchies venture forth to fight. Yes, here we go. Here's the panel. Cinder demons, these particular ones, cannot coexist with music. What a way to fight your monsters, right? At least until one of the psychic twins got killed. I don't know why, but this book, every time I've pulled it off the shelf, bits and pieces of it have always reminded me of Nausicaa by Miyazaki, and I think it's just the kind of grim, ruinous landscape that we see quite often throughout the story. And I know, Nausicaa has its moments of grim apocalypticness, but at least that does tend to veer towards a positive message. Not that this doesn't either. There are quite a few nice moments, and it does have a bit of a happy note. There's the whole thing about Sherwood being abducted by aliens, and I want to say that was actually in a different book that Dalrymple drew. I could be wrong, but lots of swords, lots of laser guns, lots of epic comic book battles. Don't want to give away too much, obviously, but it's out there, and it keeps going. There is a sense of completedness to it once you get to the end, and I don't want to show you it all, but yeah, it's out there. Time travel, space aliens, zombies, monsters, blood magic, rival gangs, post-apocalyptic desert landscapes. All the right ingredients for me. It's definitely an interesting work. So if you are into things that kind of veer out of the ordinary, and especially if it gets kind of introspective at points too, it's definitely worth a good look-see. We'll put a link down below. Hopefully Amazon's not going to be charging an arm and a leg for it. We don't want that. I'm sure it's available online in some kind of a digital format as well. But it's definitely one that's worth reading. I'd be curious for those of you who have come across it, what your thoughts are on the Wrenchies as well. I know it's been one of my favorite graphic novels, and one that I like to revisit every now and then, and it's also one that kind of got me back on track with comic books, especially graphic novels themselves. The other major one being King City by Brandon Graham, and I think maybe that's where I first came. No, it was definitely Omega, but I know Dalrymple did some work with Brandon Graham when they were doing a Prophet, I think. So yeah, fun stuff. Do give it a good look. So, with that said, this has been High Lord Tamerlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.